Hi, I'm Wanda from Alanda Craft, and today I'm going to show you how to make this really quick and easy baby quilt. Now if you're a beginner, this is an ideal one to start with. It's a variation on our easiest quilt ever, which is another great beginner's quilt. So let's get on and show you how to do it. So here's what you need. 5 strips of fabric, and they need to be 6.5 inches in width, and they need to be 40.5 inches long. So organise your strips how you want them to look, and then what we're going to do is we'll take these first 2 strips, lay one on top of the other, right sides together, and just make sure that you line it all up, and then we're going to sew down the strip with a 1/4 inch seam right down the whole length, and we'll do that with the first 2 strips, and we'll also do it with the last 2 strips. Okay, so I've sewn those strips together, and I'll just show you the back. Now you can see here that I've pressed the seam over to the darker fabric because we don't want the seam showing through the lighter fabric. So I'll just turn that back over. Now, so what we're going to do next is sew these 2 strips to the middle strip. So we'll place the middle strip on top like that, right sides together, and I'll sew that all the way down again with a 1/4 inch seam, and then when I've done that I'll sew the other 2 strips to that middle strip as well, so the whole thing will be joined. So I'll go and do that, and I'll meet you back here shortly. Okay, so as you can see I've got those strips all sewn together, and if you have a look on the back here you can see that I've pressed those seams to the darker fabric, so all the seams go towards the dark. Alright, so that's the top of that quilt finished, and now all we need to do is go and cut the batting and the backing. So I've pinned all my 3 layers together, so you can see over here I've got the backing and the front and the batting. So 3 layers, and I've pinned them so that they stay together nicely while I'm sewing. So now what we need to do is to sew all the way around the quilt, but first we're going to leave about a 6 to an 8 inch gap. Okay, so we'll start around here. And I'm going to use a walking foot for this. If you don't have one, it doesn't matter, but a walking foot keeps everything nice as you're sewing. So I'm going to start about here, and I'll do a back stitch, and then I'll sew along here with a 1/4 inch seam, and I'll go right off the end. And then I'll start again, and I'll sew right to the end, going right off, and do the same across the bottom, up the side, and the same along here. So I'll come off the end start again and come along here, stop about here with a cord and back stitch. So then that will leave me that opening. Okay, so you can see that I've sewn all the way around with this 1/4 inch seam. Okay, so that's all good, and I have actually left my opening up the top here. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn the quilt through just to make sure all the layers have caught together in the seam. I've done a quick check around to make sure nothing slipped. It shouldn't have, but I also like to check first and then cut the corners. So what I do is I just slip my hand in, go right to one of the end corners, grab hold of it and pull it through, start pulling it through. Right, and then go in and grab the other one. Okay, I can't see anything that's not caught, so we're all good. So what I'll do now is reach in and I'm going to clip each of the corners. Find the first corner, and when I clip the corners, what I do is I go across here, making sure that I don't clip my stitching, and I also like to take a little bit off each side, so just to take some of that bulk off. So I'll do that with all 4 corners, and then I'll turn them through. And don't use your scissors unless you really have to. Use a wooden spatula or something like that, because there is a tendency for the sharp points of your scissors to go through the material, and you don't want that. Now, I just wanted to show you what I use to push out the corners, and it's not a spatula, it's a wooden skewer. So I use the flat end. You can see it's got a pointy end here, but I use the flat end and I just simply push that up into the corner and just work the material out so that I get these nice points. Okay, so I've given the quilt a press, and I've also pressed in our seams on our opening. Now, if your batting's a bit thick, you may find that you want to cut a little bit back. So you can cut off about 1/8 of an inch where your opening is, so that your 1/4 inch seam here folds over it nicely. And then what we're going to do is we're going to sew all the way around this quilt with about 1/8 of an inch. Just going to top stitch it, and we're not going to go off at the ends this time. We're going to pivot and go right round. And what that will do is, apart from keeping everything nice and firm around the edge, because we're not binding, it'll also catch in our opening. Okay, so I've sewn that all the way around with 1/8 of an inch top stitch, and that holds that edging all nice and neat, and it's caught in my seam opening at the top here. So the next thing we need to think about is quilting this. Now, what quilting does is it holds the layers together, because otherwise this will all be very loose and floppy, and we don't want that. We want to keep the layers nice and firm. So what I'm going to do, just something really simple, is get my ruler, and I'm going to put the 2-inch line, you can see that here, against the seam line. I'm starting in the middle, and then I'll take my chalk and I'll draw a line down there, and I'll take that right to the end. Then I'll move that 2-inch line over and I'll lay it against the chalk line that I've just done, and again I'll draw another line all the way down, and then I'll keep doing that. Now the next one is going to be in the seam line, so in this case we'll be stitching in the ditch, which means that you pull the fabric apart a little bit and stitch down in the middle between those 2 layers. And then I'll just continue going along, measuring off 2 inches, and then I'll come back and I'll do the same on this side. And then I'll go over and I'll just sew down those lines. Now, one thing I do need to mention is that you need to start with a back stitch at the top and a back stitch at the bottom, so that that stitching doesn't unravel with washing and wear. So I'll finish quilting that shortly, but here's an example of a quilt I've already quilted, and you can see here where I've done my 2-inch lines and all the way across, and that's what it looks like on the back. You can see the 2-inch lines there. So there we go, nice, quick and easy. Now if you've enjoyed this tutorial, give us a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel, and don't forget to find us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter and Pinterest. So we'll see you next time.